Hey guys. Yeah. Remember when I told you guys I was really bad at procrastination? Yeah. I'm really bad at that. Anyway, it's here now, so yay! Chapter 4.
Clay woke up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He then realized it was morning. He jumped down from his bed and ran excitedly to his mother's room, where he found her still asleep. Clay hopped upon her bed and began to gently nudge her awake.
Mommy, wake up!
Dash stirred but was still asleep. Clay tried nudging her harder.
Come on, Mommy. You promised you'd be up for my birthday.
Dash shifted again and began muttering in her sleep. Clay leaned closer to her. What was Dash saying?
No, Soren, I can't do that for you. Still tired from before. And I need to get back to Clay.
Clay looked down at his mother confused.
What does Soren want to do, Mommy?
He knew that she would have dreams of Soren frequently, and she would often talk about doing special air tricks with him. And once Clay had heard her mention apple bucking. Clay had heard of apple bucking from Aunt Applejack, but Mommy never showed any interest of apple bucking before, so why was she talking about it in her sleep? Still confused, Clay began nudging Dash again.
No, Mommy, it's me, Clay.
Dash's eyes opened slowly. As they began to adjust, she found herself looking at the smiling face of her son, Clay.
What? Clay? Oh, good morning, sweetie.
Dash gave a loud yawn and started rubbing her eyes. She then kissed Clay on the cheek.
Happy birthday. Thanks, Mommy.
Clay said excitedly as he hugged his mother around her neck.
Can I start getting to my presents now? Sure.
Dash gave another yawn. Clay hopped off the bed and ran downstairs to the living room, while Dash forced herself to get out of the soft, warm bed. Clay found his gifts, which were placed in the center of the room in a neat circle. There were 5 in all. He picked up the purple one first, which read, Happy birthday, Clay. Love, Aunt Twilight. As Clay began shredding the paper, he had a pretty good idea what it was. It was a book. He knew it, but it wasn't like the others. Instead of something educational like she usually got him, it was a science fiction adventure book in the shape of a blue box titled The Timeless Adventures of Dr. Hoops, Volume 10. Clay had never seen this book before, and on the cover it showed a brown earth pony with a necktie and an hourglass kitty mark, and a blue box that said Police Call Box, holding a silver object in his mouth. Clay had no idea what this was about, but he was eager to read it. Next, he picked a large one from Aunt Applejack, which turned out to be a Stetson hat, much like the one Applejack herself wore. Clay tried on the hat, and found it was a little big. Even though it fell past his eyes, he still loved it. Next was Aunt Rarity's, which was a saddlebag made from the finest silks, and was speckled with small gemstones in the shape of a C. He knew his mom would make him wear it later when they got to visit, so he set it aside for now. Next he opened Aunt Fluttershy's gift, which was the tallest one. Fluttershy had given Clay a habitat, with a small caterpillar climbing the wall. This got Clay excited but also worried. This was his first time taking care of anything other than himself and his mother's pet tortoise. He had seen butterflies before, but he had never seen a caterpillar, an ugly worm transformed into something beautiful and majestic. The thought of witnessing that fascinated the little pony, who stared at the caterpillar crawling up the wall. Finally, he opened Aunt Pinky's present, which was also a book, only this one was about baking pastries. Clay had recently started baking with Pinky. He was improving over time, and now he could do it at home, with his mother's supervision, of course. Dash had come down the stairs, still looking tired and groggy, but still managed to put a smile on her face. As she saw Clay enjoy the gifts he had received, she looked at the slightly oversized hat on his head.
Applejack, you won't stop until he's a regular cow pony like you, huh?
Dash thought to herself, laughing slightly. It was at this time Clay had noticed something.
Where's your present, Mommy?
Dash gave Clay a calm smile.
Well, it's not so much a present as a surprise.
Clay's face lit up.
A surprise? What is it? What is it?
Clay began jumping up and down, clapping his front hoofs together.
If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise now, would it, Squirt?
Clay's face became a frown, or at least that's what it looked like under the hat.
Come on, it's outside.
Clay trotted up to Dash, and both of them left the house. Clay trotted alongside Dash, while she hovered just barely off the ground, leading him through Ponyville and giving the occasional wave or nod to a fan or one of her friends from when she was a weather pony. Clay simply stayed next to her. It used to be that racing and going fast was everything to Dash, and as far as the Wonderbolts were concerned, that is still true. But when it came to Clay, she just didn't have the heart to race him. She could have easily won any race against her son, with or without her wings. Yet each time she let him win. It gave her an odd sense of satisfaction to see her own son beat her at a race, something she would have asked for a rematch in her younger days. The same applied with her flying. She would never fly too high for Clay unless she had to get somewhere. Otherwise, she simply walked, or stayed high enough off the ground for Clay to still reach her. Finally, Dash led him to a secluded spot in Ponyville, away from prying eyes. Clay wasn't sure what this surprise was, and he was starting to get nervous. However, Dash landed softly next to him and smiled down at him, the gesture making any fear he had in him gone. After waiting for several minutes, Dash began to get annoyed.
Oh, where are they? Probably trying to make some fashionably late entrance.
Clay wasn't sure who his mother was talking about, and was about to ask when they both heard a feminine voice. No, Rainbow Dash, that's your thing, remember? Clay looked around. His jaw dropped. Standing in front of them was none other than Spitfire and Soren themselves. He had seen Spitfire and Soren before when he was in the VIP box at their events, so he could watch his mother perform. But he had never seen them this close before. They weren't wearing their uniforms, but Clay could easily recognize them from Spitfire's yellow fiery mane and tail, and Soren's dark blue one. Clay's heart began to thump in his chest. The fact that his two idols were standing right there was almost too much for him. Then a sense of shyness overwhelmed him. He slowly backed away, hiding behind his mother. Soren and Spitfire were busy talking to Dash, not noticing the yellow earth pony hiding from sight.
So, where is the little guy?
Dash looked to her side to see that Clay was no longer there. For a brief moment she panicked, until her back leg brushed against something small and soft. She looked down and saw her son cowering behind her.
Come on, Clay, they flew all the way from Cloudsdale just to meet you. Really?
Spitfire heard a small voice squeak behind her coworker.
Really? Now come out so we can see you,
Spitfire said encouragingly. Slowly and timidly, the earth pony poked his head out, and then his body. Standing beside his mother, slowly raised his head to meet his heroes in the eye.
Well, would you look at that? He really does exist,
Soren said, surprised.
Yeah, and you owe me 10 bits when we get back,
Spitfire said, giving a sideways glance at him. The two ponies turned their attention to the colt in front of them.
So, your mom tells us you're a fan, huh?
Yes, Miss Spitfire.
Spitfire gave him a surprised look.
Miss Spitfire, well, aren't you formal for a little colt?
Clay looked at his mother.
What does formal mean, Mommy?
It means you're polite, sweetie.
Clay was pleased that he was making a good first impression on his heroes. So are you doing well in school? Soren said to the colt.
Yes, sir. I do all my homework, and I'm never late.
Clay was becoming more comfortable around Spitfire and Soren.
And your mother tells us it's your 7th birthday today. That true?
Yep,
Clay said enthusiastically.
Has it been good so far?
it has been fun. And now that I've met you guys, it's perfect.
Soren, Spitfire, and Dash laughed. Well, glad we could help, Soren said. Clay then turned to his mother and hugged her as hard as he could.
Thank you, Mommy. This is the best birthday ever.
Both Spitfire and Soren gave heartwarming smiles at the sight.
Well, isn't that the sweetest thing ever?
Said Spitfire. Soren nodded. And it's not over yet. There's still one more thing for your birthday surprise. Clay looked back at the two Wonderbolts.
There's more?
Spitfire reached behind her wing and pulled out a large paper roll in her mouth, and then with a flick of her head unrolled it, revealing a Wonderbolt poster which was signed by Spitfire and Soren. If Clay's jaw could have dropped any lower, it would have dislocated. It's yours, kid. Enjoy, said Soren. Without thinking, Clay ran up to grab the poster, and then, to everyone's surprise, he hugged Spitfire around the leg with a big smile on his face. Dash had a worried look on her face, and Spitfire looked stunned, but then it turned into a smile. Clay let go, putting the poster in his new saddlebag.
Thank you, Miss Spitfire and Mr. Soren. I've got to show Dinky this.
As Clay ran off, Dash approached her two fellow Wonderbolts.
I'm sorry, guys. He just gets so excited sometimes.
Spitfire simply smiled.
Don't worry about it. Besides, me and Soren should get used to that soon.
Dash gave a puzzled look.
What do you mean?
Spitfire and Soren got closer to each other and gave each other a suspicious smile. And then Spitfire looked at Dash, beaming with pride.
We're going to have a foal.
Now it was Dash's turn to have her jaw drop.
Congratulations, you two.
Soren grinned back at Dash. Yeah, we're pretty excited about having a little pony running around. Dash allowed a small smile creep on her face, thinking about all the responsibilities of raising a foal she had learned while raising Clay.
This is a pretty big step in a relationship. What brought it up?
Spitfire gave Dash an embarrassed glance. Well, to be honest, Dash, you did. Dash was taken aback by what she had just heard.
Me? Why me?
Well, at first we thought you taking care of Clay was a big inconvenience for you, and was distracting you from your training. Spitfire gave a warm smile to her fellow Wonderbolt. But, as time went on, you actually seemed happier, and when you mentioned all the things that Clay would do with you, I got jealous. Dash gave Spitfire a confused look.
You were jealous? Of me?
Spitfire nodded. Clay is such a cute and wonderful colt, Dash, and we wanted to experience that too. Dash stared back at her coworker.
Well, if you think you can handle it, more power to you.
Spitfire began to nuzzle Soren's neck as he spoke to Dash. Thanks, Dash. And don't worry about Clay. We think he's going to make a fine stallion someday. And with that, the two Wonderbolts took off with lightning speed. Dash, however, just stood there.
Great. There goes my last chance to be with Soren.
Dash lowered her head. She knew that Spitfire and Soren were a couple, but they always had an on and off relationship. Secretly, Dash had hoped that Soren and Spitfire would eventually split up and not get back together, and then she would get together with him. She had been looking for a mate for a while, but having a foal gave her limited options, and Soren had always been her favorite choice. Now, he wasn't even an option. If he and Spitfire were willing to have a foal of their own, then there was no chance of making him Clay's stepfather. Dash looked up at the clouds and gave a sad sigh.
Oh well, that's that.
Clay ran through the town running as fast as his little legs could carry him, looking for his friend Dinky Hooves. They had met in kindergarten and became fast friends for several reasons. First, they were both blank flanks, so they could identify from that. Second, they were both raised by single moms that were both Pegasi. And third, even though they weren't the same race of pony as their moms, they were loved very much by them. After several minutes of searching, Clay finally spotted Dinky with her mother Ditzy Hooves, or Derpy as most called her. Ditzy was easy to spot from her cutie mark in the shape of bubbles, her blonde mane and tail, and her most outstanding feature, which were her unaligned retinas. Dinky was a grayish-purple with the same blonde mane and tail as her mother, but unlike her mother, she was a unicorn. Dinky saw Clay and waved at him. Clay waved back and trotted over to the two ponies.
Hi, Dinky. Hi, Miss Ditzy.
Dinky replied back, but her mother was silent. It wasn't that she couldn't talk, but rather she was a mere few words. Instead, she gave a wave and a friendly smile to Clay.
Happy birthday, Clay.
Dinky said as she gave her friend a hug.
Thanks, Dinky. Hey, do you want to play today? I got some cool presents from my aunts. And a surprise.
Her eyes made her hard to read sometimes, but the nod she gave was more than enough to get Dinky excited, and started running off towards Ponyville. As Clay was about to run off and catch up with Dinky, he found himself being held back by Ditzy. As he turned around thinking he had done something wrong, Clay was relieved to see Ditzy holding out one of her trademark muffins as an offering.
What's this for?
Clay unintentionally said out loud. Ditzy simply smiled and replied,
Happy birthday, Muffin.
Clay took the muffin, thanked Ditzy, and ran off to catch up with Dinky.
Well, come on. What's the surprise, Clay?
Dinky said, unable to hold her excitement. Clay had led her to the outskirts of Ponyville, far enough to be out of town, but close enough to be seen by any pony close by. Clay looked from side to side to make sure there was no one watching. Then he reached into his new saddlebag and pulled out the poster Spitfire had given him. As he unrolled it, Dinky's eyes widened in excitement.
Wow, a Wonderbolts poster signed by Spitfire and Soren? Did your mom get you this?
Clay shook his head.
Nope. Spitfire herself gave it to me.
Dinky's eyes got even wider.
Spitfire was here? Sorry, Dinky. I think I saw her fly off earlier when I was looking for you. Oh, well that's okay. You got to meet your idols. And you got an autograph from them. You're going to be the most popular pony in school tomorrow. There's no way a ground walker like you will ever be popular.
Both Dinky and Clay tensed up. They knew who that voice belonged to. A dark blue Pegasus with yellow eyes, a white mane and tail with a single dark blue stripe, and a cutie mark in the shape of pairs of wings going at supersonic speeds on his flank, came up to them with a sense of arrogance and self-entitlement. His name was Sky Terror, but to his victims, which were usually Earth ponies and unicorns, he was called Sky Terror. His family had a long-running history of being in the Wonderbolts. His father, his grandfather, and so on, all belonging to the group. So, of course, he believed he was a sure win for the Wonderbolts. However, he took it to the extreme, caring very little for safety of others, especially ponies that could not fly. He looked down at them, as if they were ants to be squashed, and his favorite ants were Clay and Dinky. Out of the three of them, he was the oldest. He approached the nervous Philly and called. He looked at the poster Clay held in his mouth, and gave an irritating glance.
You know what I love about the Wonderbolts? How they're so generous to charity cases like you, Clay.
He's not a charity case!
Dinky shouted, getting between Clay and Sky. Sky simply glanced down with a smug look.
Like you would know. I mean, your mom's a freak with those eyes. I bet she can't even fly straight half the time.
Sky gave a cold laugh as he threw his head back.
You two don't even have dads. Clay was adopted, so he has an excuse. But your dad must have grown a brain and decided to leave while he still could.
At this point, tears began to form in Dinky's eyes.
You shut up about my mommy!
Or what? She'll crash into me when she tries to take off?
He laughed again. Dinky was on the point of breaking down as she hung her head back, tears falling to the ground below. Clay was filled with anger at what he was seeing, and then he placed himself between Sky and Dinky.
Shut up! Dinky's mom is great, and so is mine!
Sky looked down on the small coat.
Oh, yeah, Rainbow Dash is a great mom, and a Wonderbolt. For a Philly fooler.
Sky threw his head back and laughed even harder. Clay had no idea what Philly fooler meant, but he had heard that word whispered behind his mother's back a few times. When he had asked his mom what it meant, she would simply tell him that it was a word to describe certain males, that it was meant to be hurtful, and that she would tell him what it meant when he was older. Sky continued on his rant when he caught his breath.
It's sad, really. Your mom, the great Rainbow Dash, and she doesn't have anybody to follow in her hoofsteps. Well, for now, anyway.
Sky said, giving an evil smirk.
What's that supposed to mean?
Clay said, filled with rage.
Think about it. You're a dirty earth pony. She's a Pegasus. How's she supposed to leave a legacy if her only colt can't fly? Unless she's got another pony child like her, so she can replace you.
The words stung Clay.
Shut up! My mommy loves me, and she would never replace me!
Tears were beginning to form in his eyes, as Sky scoffed.
Please. She took you just because she wanted to look like a hero. And then, when she couldn't find any pony to take you, she got stuck with you until further notice. She doesn't love you. You're just a burden to Equestria's greatest flyer.
Again, Sky laughed. Clay felt angrier than before. Not only had Sky insulted his friend and his mother, but to say anything bad about his mother was enough to make him do something most ponies his age wouldn't dare to do. He lowered his head, kicked up some dirt with his right front hoof, and charged headlong into the still laughing Pegasus. Sky was thrown on his back with a loud oomph, while Clay landed on his rump, shaking his head from the collision. Sky got up and looked at the still dazed earth pony in front of him with daggers in his eyes.
Wow, you little unwanted dirt-eating mule!
Sky then charged at Clay and knocked him back several feet in the air before he hit the ground with a large thud. Dinky could only watch as the whole scene happened before her, as she looked at the motionless Clay on his side. She ran up to him, shaking him with her hoof.
Clay! Clay, are you okay? Say something!
Clay opened his eyes and shook his head, while Sky ran over to Clay's saddlebag that had fallen to the ground. He picked it up and flew to a nearby tree, and placed it in a nearby branch, but not before taking the Wonderbolts poster with him as well.
I'll be taking this with me. Something this divine shouldn't be in the hoofs of somebody as filthy as you.
Clay looked on with pain-filled eyes while Sky flew off into the distance with his most prized possession. Dinky watched slowly to Clay, trying to think of something to make him feel better.
Clay, are you all right?
She said, placing a hoof on his shoulder. Clay continued to stare at the sky with a look of hopelessness.
Come on, let's get your mom and tell her what happened.
Clay suddenly snapped out of his trance and looked at Dinky with terror.
Oh no! My mom will kill me when she finds out what happened. I'll be grounded forever!
Clay covered his face with his hoofs, tears forming in his eyes. Then he looked up at the tree holding his saddlebag and started to walk to it.
Clay, what are you doing?
Clay placed his hoofs on the stump and started to climb his way up.
Clay, please come down. You're gonna get hurt.
Clay wasn't listening. He was following his single-minded determination to get his saddlebag back. Dinky started to pace back and forth nervously, until finally she took off to find some pony to talk sense into him.